Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminger with the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. For more information about our Public Affairs Forum, you can visit our church website at www.austinuu.org. Our forum panel today will present the status of science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM education, the ongoing projects to increase STEM education, and its effectiveness in the implications of increasing STEM education. Our panel moderator is Dennis Tardan. He is a professional interviewer and speaker. Dennis began his journalism career in 1973 and has worked as a wire service correspondent, reporter, and talk show host, television producer, and in 1996 began his corporate communications coaching practice. He will now introduce our panel.
Thank you, Carolyn. I want to say thank you to the First UU Church in Austin for holding these forums, which are such a vital and important conversation for all of us to have about the issues that are in the 21st century. When historians write about this time, one of the things that they're going to write about is that this was when we left the planet. This is we humans and all our plants and animals and our microbes are actually going to populate the solar system and beyond. And in order to do that work, all of the people, from the garbage collectors to those who unstop the space toilets, to those who take care of who are injured and infirmed and keep healthy, the humans and the plants and the animals are going to have a science, technology, engineering, and math mindset. And not only those who are leaving the planet, but those who are staying here. In order for us to have a sustainable Mother Earth, we all are going to have to understand and upgrade our science, technology, engineering, and math thinking and the work that we're doing. And this magnificent panel that we have, that Donna Cosper has assembled today for us here at the First UU is going to do it. I want to introduce from my right, Tricia Berry. Tricia is the director of Women in Engineering program at the University of Texas at Austin's Cockrell School of Engineering and Collaboration. And you're the lead in the Texas Girls Collaborative Project. Lisa Brown leads the academic youth development work at the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin, where she focuses on psychology and learning, science, and innovations that can transform students' lives and overall classroom climate. Michelle Mann, you are with the board of Austin Science and Education Foundation, previously part of the teacher advisory committee that helped Austin Energy to run the science fair. And you're pursuing your PhD in STEM education at the University of Texas at Austin. Rusha Joshi, you are a senior at the International Baccalaureate program at Westwood High School. And you are representing the students here on the panel. As you will see in your program, Rusha is a highly honored and a deeply involved person that we'll get into more during the panel. Angela Pinheiro de Hoyos Hart. She's the Innovation Project Manager at General Motors and also with the City of Austin's Mayor's Task Force of Institutional and Systemic Racism and Inequalities, and much more. Anyway, I have barely scratched the surface of the bios, but I want to get into the panel immediately. For these spacecraft to take off, they need a solid foundation. And as I was doing and getting a chance to talk with the panel beforehand, Lisa and I were talking about an epiphany that she had one day on an airplane headed to California. Would you give us, Lisa, a little background and what this is so that we can begin talking about what the entire format of how we're going to sprout and grow STEM everywhere?
Well, I'll do my best. Thank you. It's great to be part of this forum. The story I was sharing with Dennis is that I came to the Dana Center after many years of teaching middle school math here in the Austin area. And my job was to go out and provide professional development for middle school math teachers. And early on, I had been told that I would be part of a project and I should do some pre-reading in advance of this meeting we were having out in Silicon Valley. I'm working in East Texas. I work all day. I'm exhausted. I drive as fast as possible to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. I get on an airplane and catch the last plane to Silicon Valley that night. And I finally read these articles because we're meeting at 8 o'clock the next morning. I'd had them for a couple of months, of course. And I was blown away by what I was reading. And I have to say, I had a very visceral reaction. One was personal. I was like, I'd never heard about this research before. This is the work of Carol Dweck in Growth Mindset. It's the work of Claude Steele and Joshua Aronson in Stereotype Threat. And they had specific strategies that teachers could be using in classrooms, which I had not been using. So this was the personal thing. The other piece of the personal thing was I realized, oh my gosh, this explains why I didn't go to college until I was 26. My mindset. The second was more about regrets as a teacher. I wished that we were talking about this stuff every day. It's 12 years later, and that's actually my job, to talk about this stuff every day. The growth mindset stuff. So.
Wonderful. Tricia, could you expand on that, on the psychology, because you work in that, and the psychology of learning and how that expands, and how we're actually going to disseminate this out to where it's actually effective. We plant a seed, it has to grow in a fertile environment.
Yeah, the growth mindset is a big one. We use that in everything that we do and trying to instill that in kids that we might be working with, doing hands-on activities. We try to instill that in our current engineering students on campus so that they continue to understand that they need to grow and learn, and that they're not just born knowing how to do differential equations and complicated engineering problems, that you have to work at it, and that if we work at it, we can learn, and with that learning, we can grow. And one of the ways that we really try to do that, both with little kids as well as with current students as well as with adults, is to have the conversation around failure and to talk about how failure is really important in that process and that it's okay to fail. And in engineering, if we don't fail, we're not doing our jobs, because we need to have that failure in the lab. We need to have that failure before something gets out into the community and has the potential to kill somebody when it doesn't work correctly. So that failure process and understanding that just because it fails, whatever it is that we're doing doesn't mean that we're a failure. It means that we're going to learn from that, and we're going to figure out how to do it, and we're going to continue to persist and try again until we get it. And we know that if our STEM students don't have that growth mindset, if they don't have that belief that I can figure this out, I can get it, if I keep working at it, I can get it, they're not going to succeed in those STEM spaces. So we have to talk about our own failures so they understand that failure is okay, that it's part of that process, that's part of who we are as engineers and scientists. That failure is core and really important, because we know we can eventually get to those successes through those failures.
Thank you. You know, Michelle, you have had the boots on the ground. You've been in the high school. You have, as one of many teachers on the panel. Can you talk about how that's working and how we're getting ourselves into the mindset, into the STEM mindset?
Well, okay. Let me see. As you pointed out, we don't have these conversations enough in the classroom. But There is a lot of programs going on where we're giving students that more the understanding that they can grow and that it's not something they just come in with to the classroom, and giving them those experiences so they possibly, can continue to grow. My research is on a little bit kind of a deviation from that slightly, but I do my research on science identity development. And I really want to see students have the opportunities to see themselves as future scientists. And I focus on science. My degree is actually in STEM, so I could have it engineering identity, and there's a lot of research on engineering identity. But just because of my background, I choose science. But giving the students an idea, some successes, and some agency that that they can see themselves going into these fields. So many times you'll hear students, I had a fifth grader the other day tell me, he's at a very progressive elementary school, and he said, I always thought about going to college, and I thought I would. And then I looked around my family and realized we're not college-going people in fifth grade. And this isn't an A student. This is a student that works hard. So we've got to change that idea. We've got to change them seeing how they can be successful and their identity with, okay, you were good at this, you have what can you go and change? How can you go into these fields? It's not that every child should go into science or engineering or STEM for that matter, but we do need to give every child that opportunity to see themselves in those fields. We don't need to shut the door by fifth grade.
How often I have talked myself out of something before I've even tried it. And so that's our opportunity on how do we see it. So Rucha, when you are actually in school right now and you have seen, how are we doing? How are we doing in getting that message down there? What are you seeing when you tutor at the elementary school and the work that you do? Would you talk about that, please?
I think in terms of addressing how failure is all right, and you need to learn how to grow from that. In elementary school, at least, when I tutor the kids in computer science, and we teach them basic programming concepts, a lot of the times the kids really struggle with trying to understand how loops work or something of that sort, and a lot of them do become frustrated. And so, but I think but I think that they're doing really well, and that once we sit with them and kind of show them that if you go through the problem and think of it logically, it's not difficult at all, but instead of just becoming frustrated and trying to give up, but keep working at it, calm down a bit, and then you can get it. So I think that it's definitely working at elementary school students, the ones that I work with. But also in terms of high school, etc., classes do start to get pretty tough, and a lot of the times you don't do well in a class, or you think that everyone else is excelling, but I'm not, so I guess I'm just not as smart as everyone else. And I have to say this has happened to a lot of friends of mine. It's happened to me too in my A-push class. But I think that if you're just supported by a lot of your friends or your family and just kind of come around with a community, then you can try and overcome whatever failures you're achieving and try and work at it together. So I think that really helps.
That's precisely what we're going to talk about in the growth mindset. How do we keep people in that and have failure as an important component of it? Now, you, Angie is with GM and has been with Google and has worked with, from the end, on getting the recipient. What is the mindset from within, both contributing to the growth of STEM, at the same time being the recipient of the graduates that are coming in, the talent pool that's hitting there? What do you see?
In the talent pool that's coming into the companies?
Right, the talent pool that's coming into the companies, and how you are helping from the inside, from the corporate world, because corporates can't just sit there and go, well, we're not getting the talent, I don't know what's going on. There has to be some kind of an investment to be able to do it, and that's what part of your work.
Yeah, I think in a large corporation, it's easy to lose meaning in your work. The classic example of the cog in the machine. You're focused on your little piece of this giant, to take the car analogy, if you're just building, one little God, I'm so bad at car analogies. Give me a car name. Anyone? Car part. Car part? Spark plug. Thank you. So if you're just building a little spark plug, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that, hey, I'm building a self-driving car that's going to help pick up the elderly and take them to their doctor's appointments safely. So I think corporate participation in STEM education gives the opportunity for meaning and connection and employee engagement to the fact that, hey, I'm here and I'm doing pretty okay, and look at these kids and how far they can come if we're willing to help them.
That's what's happening. And you're seeing that? Are there programs within GM that you're working on and that you're seeing?
Absolutely. So we partner with SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers, to run a program called A World in Motion. And we work with the entire 4th and 5th grade class of River Oaks Elementary in North Austin to build a pipeline of talent. And the goal isn't, to your point, we're not saying that every kid has to be an engineer, but every kid should have that opportunity. And if you are so far behind socially from your peers who were, reading at a 1st grade level in kindergarten, and you're in 4th grade trying to figure out how to write 395, well, you got a long way to go. And if you have educational experience after experience that makes you feel stupid, that makes you feel discouraged, that makes you feel angry and frustrated, then you're never going to catch up and you're never going to get into that growth mindset. So the purpose of this specific STEM program is to build confidence, to build excitement, to give opportunity to experiment and fail with straw rockets and balloon-powered cars, and really show that you don't need a $500 Lego set to experiment in engineering. The materials you have in your home are enough to figure out, hey, what happens if I make this little paper straw rocket and I add a penny at the end, or I add a piece of Play-Doh and make it heavier? Does it go farther? Does it land more accurately? And you can experiment with the things that you have access to and gain that experience and help put you into that growth mindset.
Thank you. Now, Tricia, could you talk about what's going on in the best practices and how we're helping students to engage in STEM?
Yeah, so I think exactly what we were just hearing about, some of the examples of hands-on activities, those opportunities for kids to get in there and explore. I was laughing because we just did straw rockets with my first-year college students this past week, because they also need to understand that, yes, you may have not done as well as you would have liked on that chemistry test that you just took, but part of this is learning how to navigate college and how to go to office hours and how to ask for help, which you may never have had to do in high school or any of your K-12 experience. And so having those opportunities for students to try things out, test things, work through that process of, okay, I just made my straw rocket and it went this far. That was not as far as I thought it would go and not where I wanted it to be. So now what can I do? Well, let me make it again. Well, now I can get it to go that far. Well, is that as far as you want it? No, I bet I can do it a little bit better. And then you get it improved again, and you get it to go even farther. Or maybe it goes backwards, and you have to figure out, what am I doing and how am I working through this? And having those explicit conversations along the way about that design process and that process of thinking and trying is a best practice to engage all kids in STEM. It's that way for them to try out critical thinking. It's a way for them to understand that failure in making a straw rocket does not make them a bad engineer down the road. It's a straw rocket. You just keep trying. And it allows you to have those conversations with kids that help them see that they can explore a lot of different things, including STEM fields down the road.
Now I'm going to toss this out to the panel. Are there special techniques or ways of approaching your elementary students, then approaching the high school students, and then those post-hormonal pre-adults known as adolescents, where we're having to deal with that? Do we use different ways of approaching that?
I'll try to address some of the issue with regard to adolescents. In the work that we've been doing at the Charles A. Dana Center, we have some interventions that are targeted at kids at this critical transition between middle school and high school. And when you're trying to, so for example, give a growth mindset message, the research tells us that we need to do this with a light touch. You can get a little bit too heavy-handed, and I think right now the growth mindset movement is very energizing, but it would be unfortunate if it became sort of the next buzzword that just says more yammer, yammer, yammer from adults, right? So, having that growth mindset message is important, but it's a hollow message if we don't also provide students with challenging academic work and critical academic skills. And so for those middle school students or those early high school students, they need to be convinced of this through their own efforts. We can continue to say, keep trying harder, but we've got to really slow down and make sure that their effort is effective. We have a lot of students who are persistent, but they don't progress. So how do we help them look at their mistakes? And that's especially important in this critical time when students are also questioning their sense of belonging. So I think about mindsets in three ways, really. You've got the mindset, the growth mindset is really about, do I believe in my own capabilities? But then there's another mindset that students have, which is around their belongings. They're belonging to that discipline. So am I a math person? So I worked for years in a grocery store. Nobody ever came through my line and said, I'm not a reading person. But about every fifth person said, oh, I'm not a math person. And so, how do we help more students identify as, quote, math people or science people? And then I think there's a third mindset that's about purpose. Is what I'm doing in school connected in any way with the aspirations that I have for myself? So that's kind of a broader view, but I think that especially adolescents have those three questions in mind.
Michelle, you have the B and the C students, and that this is a particular, because we know the A students, and I'm not accepting you because I see the hard work that you do, Rucha, and all you have all done. But I was certainly one of those that was not interested nor fulfilling my potential when I was in school. So you take those B and C students, is there a different strategy and a way of getting them, Michelle?
Well, I think you've got to show them that they are worthy and that they can accomplish many things, and hard work, and realizing that they don't wake up knowing how to do differential equations. I have 3 calcs, and I still have to think about how to do differential equations. I'm a biologist, so I didn't have to use it much. But I think some of the systemics around how we produce future science students or maybe future engineering is off a little. We honor and we support and we push those students that are our high A students. And we say, you're smart, you can do science. We have this idea that to do science and engineering, you have to be a special, really smart person to do it. And you have to be smart to do humanities. I couldn't write a novel. I can't write my way out of a paper bag very well. So, you've got to have these, so we've got to take away that kind of barrier to that. And we really want in our future scientists and our future engineers, those students that can think beyond regurgitating back to us what we give them. So to have that better straw rocket, we could have a student that goes online and does the perfect straw rocket and builds it just like they're shown on YouTube, and they will have a successful straw rocket, and we will give them, awards and all that. Or we could have, or what we really want though is somebody that goes beyond that perfect, already discovered straw rocket and go beyond and find something even better. We have honored our Super A students, and believe me, I was right there. I ran a science research class for years, and I always had the top 3 students in that class, of the class. So, I was working with them. But those students that are those B students and C students that may think slightly outside of the box and say, what if I put on 2 straws? Or what if I added baking soda and vinegar? I don't, these are out of my realm of engineering ideas. But those students that are thinking outside the box, and I think sometimes that we shut the door to them, especially when we're talking the gateway courses that they all go through, that chemistry, that awful organic I still have nightmares about from college. We need to get away from this, oh, you got a C in this class, get out of this. This isn't your field. So many students transfer out, and I don't know the exact numbers, but so many students transfer out of STEM programs in college because they get that B+. Because they think that they have to have that straight A's to get there. They don't have the idea that, okay, maybe I'm not totally regurgitating stuff back the way they want. We want in our labs and in our development groups, we want those people that are thinking beyond what's already been done. We want those B and C students that are thinking of those other what-if ideas.
And if I can just add some color to that, people who transfer out of STEM at the college level, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a forensic pathologist. I was like 6, I wanted to cut open dead people and find out why they died, and it was my dream and my passion. I collected every bone and dead insect I could find anywhere. I thought it was the coolest thing. Why wouldn't anyone want to do this? So 4th grade, I still remember I get my first C in math, and that identity flips. I am not a math person. And you can easily, bring me to tears on my knees with a whiteboard or a chalkboard and a piece of chalk and a simple algebraic equation because of that mindset shift. And there was a time in 7th grade, I think the first pre-algebra class I took, I had a 12 the first 6 weeks of school. So I was not a B student or a C student. I was a Z student. And even though I had the passion, I had a lot of administrators and teachers telling me, oh, honey, this is not for you. So.
Rucha, how do you feel? How is the peer-to-peer support for those who are struggling, those who might be falling off the cracks, down the cracks?
I think that a lot of what happens in high school is, like you said, there's like a sense of purpose and belonging, and that when you hang out with like other people who are succeeding, then you don't really feel like admitting to people that, hey, I'm struggling in something, or that, hey, you got 100 on this quiz, I kind of failed it. You don't really want to admit that to yourself, but you really want to, you just want to, you don't tell other people that. So I think a lot of the times what a lot of people do is they just like hold it to themselves, and they don't really try and reach out to other people to see like, how can I improve myself? And so that kind of that's the opposite of the mindset that we want, and that we want people to like go and like try harder and like talk with our teachers to see, I'm not doing well, how can I do better? So I think that's a lot of what I see personally in high school, that people really like hold back to themselves, keep things to themselves, and they don't really try and reach out, which I think, I'm not too sure how we can like improve that, but I suppose just with more and more support. So like peers, if we see someone struggling, then we do need to go reach out to them and be like, hey, I can help you out. This is what I did. This is how I solved the question. How can I help you out there? So.
That's part of this, because all of us will have a to-do list coming out of here. If we've done our job, all of us are going to have something that stimulates. Tricia?
I was just going to add to that, one of the things that we had seen with our first-year engineering women in particular was that we would see that confidence drop pretty quickly in their belief that they could graduate with this engineering degree. They came in believing that they could, and then they got into these classrooms and they went through their first round of tests, and all of a sudden that confidence just dropped. And some of what we were finding is some of the stereotype threat that we heard Lisa talk a little bit about earlier, was this sense that I don't belong, or that I'm not as good at the math or the science as my peers. And what we found is that they would hear oftentimes the guys in their classroom coming out of those tests going, psh, that was easy, I had all that in high school, piece of cake, I aced it. And the young women would be walking out of those classrooms going, I didn't have that in high school. I'm not so sure I aced that. That was pretty hard. but they'd never share that out loud, of course. And so what was really happening was that the grades of the women were equal to, if not better than that of the guys. The guys would just boast about it, even if they didn't do very well. And so we started to tell our first-year women, here's what your average GPA looks like across the first-year class compared to that of your male peers. Look, it's the same, if not above. Look at your graduation rates. It's the same, if not above. You are meant to be here. You were admitted into this program. You are just as deserving. Don't listen to what you hear because it's not necessarily true. You are just as good. You're going to have to work hard, but so are they. So be confident in yourself, and that's where we would turn to our peer mentors as well to share their failures. Yeah, I failed my first test. Yeah, I was on academic probation that first year, but look at what I've done. Now I figured out where to get tutoring. I figured out where to get the help. I would go to office hours. I now have an internship with Company X, or I did undergraduate research, and now here's where I am. But I too failed my very first semester. And so it gives that kind of permission for students to fail and to be okay asking for help and to be able to somewhat dismiss those things that they might hear from their peers in the classroom.
Lisa, you specifically have addressed this with the junior college, that transition from college into junior college into the math. Would you talk about that, please?
Yes, I have colleagues who are working at the higher ed space. My expertise is more about this transition from middle school to high school, but this other critical transition, especially the one you're speaking about, is helping as students are coming into, especially into community college. Sometimes as many as half of the students coming into community college require remediation in math. And often they also require remediation in language arts. And the challenge is that in the past we've addressed this problem by giving them remedial classes that prepare them to eventually take college level algebra. We found that less than half of the students ever earned a transferable credit. That means they never earned a degree. If you think about it, if you can't get a transferable math credit, you're not going to get a degree. And so we started to approach the problem in a systemic way by thinking about what are the pathways that we can offer students that are not just a STEM pathway, but that keep yet the doors open for a STEM pathway. And part of that work is helping students understand what is college going look like. I think we think people make it look easy. No one's never admitting how much effort that they put into something. And so we're welcoming students into community college by helping them understand how to do college, how to ask for help, that asking for help is an important, critical skill of succeeding in college that's sometimes not talked about, right? So, and then also providing the support and the remediation at the same time that they're progressing through coursework. So many students would be stuck taking course after course after course in a pre-algebra context, and now we are finding success, a tremendous success of students getting a transferable credit-bearing course in 1 year that matches a pathway that's consistent with the aspirations that they have for themselves.
I'm very interested in diversity. And as anyone can tell here we have 5 women and Dennis. And this is how, when I grew up in business in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, there were very few women, very few that were at the senior levels and certainly that were entering in. I'm very interested in how you're seeing diversity today, the value of it, the barriers to getting more women into science, technology, engineering, and math. So who would like to pick up on that first? And I would like to go around the panel and ask.
I think I have the easy answer. Since, during introductions before the panel started, we all said what our name was and who we're with, and I said, my name is so-and-so, and I'm a free agent, I'm not representing anyone. But I do work for General Motors, and we have the first female CEO of an automotive industry who started as an engineering co-op right out of college, and engineered her way to the top, pun intended. So I think it's very easy, that idea of you can't be it or you can't dream it if you can't see it. So it's been great to have this additional layer of representation in such a male-dominated field. And I kind of tend to blow off those claims of being a male-dominated field until we did a training recently at work. And we were very lucky to be able to go out to the F1 track here in Austin. And at break time, everybody's got to go potty. And for the first time in my life, there was a line from the bathroom through the amphitheater all the way back to the entrance doors at the very front for the men's room. There was no line at the women's room, and I think every day, I have all these managers who are women and directors who are women and peers who are women, and then the recent college grads who are women. But when you line everyone up for the bathroom, you can really see what that gender gap is. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Well,
but
yes, that's it, Tricia.
So I can follow on that because role models are really important, and that helps to counter those stereotypes that we have. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers still to diversity in these STEM fields, is that we still lack the role models. We lack the role models in the faculty that we have at our institutions. They're not as diverse as we would like to see. And then we don't have the number of role models out in industry, or those that are coming back to volunteer in the schools to be able to show these kids, this is something that you can do. I've been where you are, and now here's where I am. And so the more that we can get out there and showcase to students, from the little ones all the way through to our college students, and even those who are in the workplace, that there are others ahead of them that look like them, that have those similar experiences, we're going to struggle, because it's hard to be something that you cannot see. You've got to have those role models in place, and we need to make those STEM role models more and more visible. And we're starting to see some of that in the media, sort of. Some commercials that companies are doing that are really trying to highlight some of the diversity in their STEM spaces are pretty good, but we have a long way to go.
Absolutely. Michelle, and then Rucha, please.
I think we have to go beyond the role models, though. Role models are great, and it helps us envision, but we've got to give all the students opportunities where they can be successful, they can build that agency, and they can build that idea that they can do this. I hate to go with identity, but they can build that identity. And role models work only so far. I mean, that is the first step. But they still look at them, well, they had different opportunities than me. Or, they had this given to them and I don't have that. I'm not at a mainly white school as though 2 or 3 minority students, and, I'm at a high minority school and I'm not going to have the same opportunities. So I think we need to give them some successes to tie that onto. When the going gets tough, and it's going to get tough because we have high academic demands for our future STEM students. And when the going gets tough, they've got to have something that they can fall back on that says, this is me and I can do this. I have a former student who's in her 8th year as a future microbiologist, and she was most of her life up until 16 a foster child. She is Hispanic and everything against her. And yet she perseveres through. The last time I talked to her about chemistry, she said, after failing it 4 times, now I know how to do well. And I'm going to, it took her 5 times to get through that first chemistry, but the second one she streamed through because she had learned how to study. But if she didn't have that strong identity that I am a microbiologist, I can do this, she wouldn't be persevering. I mean, she's got so many barriers. She has 2 children by the age of 20 that she's a single mother supporting. But because she has that drive, she's still sticking with it. She works all night as a phlebotomist and goes to class the next day because she has to, of course, support herself to do this.
I'm very interested in how mindset, the growth mindset, builds character and how that works. So how do you see how, go ahead, first talk about diversity and go ahead about how do we build character so that we actually build these skills, because it's not just what, it's how.
In terms of diversity, what I was going to start saying is that we were talking first about women in STEM, so I was going to mention that from elementary school, I'm helping out kids in computer science. There's like half the kids are girls, and it's all fine. But then, like in my computer science class, there's like 3 girls and there's like 20 guys, and I was pretty lucky because in my freshman year, I had a computer science teacher, Miss Patterson, and she was very like passionate about CS, and that just really like inspired me. So she would have been like my role model kind of as I was going through high school, because she really enjoyed the subject and she really made me like it too. So it was through her that I decided to like keep going in STEM. But as you're talking, we do need to go further with role models, and so I think passion, or like the drive, comes from like you said, like when you individually do succeed and you can see that, hey, I can do this. So if there's more opportunities offered, or even like if there's more like advertisement of, hey, this, like you can go through this club, or there's like this internship available, or something along these lines, if more students had access or just knew that you can do this, then that could like, then that would definitely inspire them to try and work harder. And then in terms of like the mindset and character, once you do have that confidence in yourself that I can succeed and that I'm going to go through my chemistry course 5 times because I know I can get there eventually, that does build character, because you just start to have confidence, and you say that I'm not going to rely on like cheating or on like help asking someone else for answers, but I can do this by myself. So it really gives you another like dimension to your character.
Such a value to be willing to say, I don't know, and teach me, help me to know. Lisa?
I think another important piece of this is just the classroom climate and culture, the overall classroom climate and culture. When we think about the growth mindset, that the central message there is that anyone can get better at anything with consistent and effective effort. And we want that, I think, is an important message for diversity. Not just some students, but anyone can get better at anything with consistent and effective effort. And that in a growth mindset culture, that central message is at play. Continually putting forth the message that anyone can belong to STEM disciplines or anything else that you want to put your mind to. You know, you want to get better at being an athlete, work hard, learn from your mistakes, etc. You want to get better at any subject in school, likewise. When we started working with students, we hoped to change their mindsets about what they were capable about. But what we realized is when we went to train the teachers, we suddenly had this epiphany that it was going to have as much of an impact on the teachers as it was on the students, because they're suddenly seeing their students as more capable than they had thought them to be. And so in spite of what we have widely in sort of institutional discrimination in education in the United States, we are continuing to make progress and not giving up on this issue of welcoming more young people into whatever discipline they aspire towards.
Is there any discipline that does not require the kinds of critical thinking and learning and the growth mindset that you guys are talking about? So it's all there. I mean, when we look at how we're going to navigate and this in the 21st century, this is what we have to make sure that we know and learn how to learn, know what we don't know and what we don't know that we don't know as we're going out about this. What's next? Where are we? What are the blockages? What are the impediments that you see? Angie, you were talking about that there, like here in Austin, where we are, that we've got an affordability challenge. And could you talk about that a little bit, please?
So that's a tough one to unwrap, but in context of education and STEM fields, there is such a disparity in quality and access to education in the city of Austin, where if you look at a map of the city, and I'm on the City Planning Commission, so I'm interested in zoning by single family housing, median family income, and school achievement rates. I mean, there is a fault line down the city of where these opportunities are mapped. And so one thing that we're trying to do as a community in the year 2017 is to pass a new land development code called Code Next. And if you've wondered, why does this matter? Studies consistently show that this boring debate among city bureaucrats that you might, or that's how you might have thought of it before, is actually the key to providing equal opportunities in education. So studies show that diverse housing types promote integrated, socioeconomically and racially integrated schools, which promote these STEM outcomes that we're talking about. So I'm not sure if that's getting at the heart of your question.
So help me to know, because when I think of diversity and I think of the value of it, I look at that wonderful garden that we have out the window, and the reason why it thrives is because there is such great diversity. Anytime we have a monoculture, we know how it depletes the soil, it depletes the thinking. When we get this kind of diversity at the decision-making levels, at the innovative levels, suddenly we think differently. We are able to come up with ideas and creativity. So I need someone to talk about the creative process and how we're taking this forward and being in the kind of mindset that's going to be able to move us forward.
I don't know if this is the right direction, but I will say that one of the challenges is that STEM is everything and it's everywhere, and I think lots in the community see it as important, but they still don't really know themselves what it is. And so we have a lot of STEM programs in Central Texas. Some are really good quality and are using the research-based best practices to engage kids and to support them and get them excited and prepared to continue on, whereas others maybe aren't at the same quality level. And some of the research really shows that if it's a poor quality STEM experience, then you can really do a lot of damage as far as the identity, as far as the students feeling like they can continue and persist in this space. And with the STEM demands on our world, as you mentioned before, we cannot afford to have those types of experiences for students. So we need to figure out how to raise the quality and level of all of these experiences, whether they happen in the formal education classroom or the out-of-school time experiences, because we need all of these students believing that they can go on and do the math and do the science in some form of fashion. They don't have to be those experts in differential equations, but they do need to have that sense that I can figure it out, whatever it is in the STEM space. And so I think one of our challenges as a community is to figure out how to raise the level of the STEM quality of experiences that are happening. And there's some efforts that are happening within the Greater Austin STEM ecosystem that are working on that, in particular in summer camp programs. And there's a Summer STEM Funders network of a collaboration of companies and organizations that are funding summer camps and are doing quality assessments on those summer camps to help raise the level of all of those programs so that we can offer a better experience for all of the students that are engaging in those.
I think another thing that is sometimes an issue in terms of impediments to welcoming students into STEM fields is that young people want to make a difference in their world. And we don't always make it clear to young people how a given discipline helps people. So we had interviewed a colleague who studies motivation in STEM fields, and she said they had this panel of female engineers come forward, and each of the engineers talked about their amazing work, but they didn't make it clear how engineers solve problems in the world. The other thing that they didn't anticipate was a question from a young woman in the audience who said, "Are any of y'all mothers?" And they hadn't invited any engineers who had children. So the unfortunate message there is, do I have to make a choice between raising a family and being in the STEM field? So I think we have to think very carefully about about the aspirations that students have for their whole lives, not just for their professional selves.
Do we have some questions from the audience? Please be sure, and we have a microphone. Carolyn is going to be distributing, but please.
I was wondering what's happening with how you compare yourselves to what's going on in Europe and Far East Asia in terms of STEM programs.
Have any of y'all looked at Southeast Asia or looked at Asia and seeing how we are comparing to, are we staying up, are we not, are we falling behind? What's the situation?
I mean, I can just anecdotally, but we don't always, in the U.S., our mission is to educate all children all the way up through high school and to give them all opportunities. Also, and this is another basket we do not want to open, is the whole testing thing. We also test all of our children. That's not always the case in other countries, and so sometimes we're comparing our group to their group, and they're not the same comparison group.
It's a complicated
It's much more complicated than just saying our test scores are lagging, and there's also, we're comparing it with test scores, and that's not necessarily with skills and with knowledge and with future, and who's going to be the most innovative in the future. So I don't know that.
I understand you're saying that they're doing better.
I don't know that we're doing better.
If you could repeat your question.
But our philosophy in education is somewhat different than a lot of the places we're comparing to. Now, there's also some other systemic issues. In Finland, we constantly are comparing to Finland. And I spent, a whole 6 months in Finland studying their education system, and there's a different attitude towards their education system than there is in ours. There's the attitude that the teachers know best, and we're going to support them and give this, and we're often kind of running counter, society to our education. Every political race, we say our education system is horrible because we can say that, but there's not that attitude in several of the other countries too. So I can't really answer your question in this limited forum, but I think that we are coming a long way with innovative programs to support students thinking and growing. I don't know that we meet everybody. Well, we obviously do not meet everybody's needs, but we are having conversations.
Thank
We
you,
have another
Michelle.
question from Becky Halpin.
So since most of you up there are women, I'll ask you this. In one of our other forums, we had a very brave trans woman come and speak to us. And before she was a very lovely trans woman, and I will add technological engineer, she was an IT engineer. She was an IT engineer as a man. And she said that once she became a woman IT engineer, she noticed a shift in the way other engineers related to her. They would almost dismiss her. Whereas in the past, as a man, she never felt that. So, and she felt that she was just as good as engineer as a woman as she was as a man, and I'm sure she was. So there's been a lot of brouhaha in the media too about the way women, and particularly IT, are treated and seen. And I'm wondering if you would remark on women in STEM once you are actually working. How do you think we can help them?
So as the de facto woman in IT on here, I'll just go first and take a stab at that. In my personal experience, I think in early stages in your career, there's a lot of awareness. People are coming out of college, they may have that non-buzzword growth mindset that makes them think, I'm new here, I'm going to learn the culture, I'm going to figure out how to do things well. And what I've seen is that once you get, and maybe this is the previous panelist's position as they've grown in their career and gotten older, I think that there are diminishing opportunities and diminishing representation in leadership and technology for women. So since I'm not there in my career yet, it's hard for me to really deconstruct that puzzle, but I will say that I see increasing numbers of women leaders in IT positions, but definitely not to what the representative amount would be in my mind.
And I'll just say that across different sectors of industry, IT is still one of the most challenging culture and climate-wise for women. And I'm actually right in the midst of a podcast that is called Stuff Your Mother Never Told You, and it's Sexism in Silicon Valley Part 1, and they said there was so much they're also doing Part 2. And it's talking to some of this research as of late where they've interviewed women in the tech industry in Silicon Valley, and the percentages of those who have experienced sexist behavior directly to themselves or they've observed it in their company, it's above 80% in every category they were measuring. It's rampant still, unfortunately, in the tech industry. And there are pockets where that is changing, and there are companies where they are making a focused effort to not allow that, and it comes from the leadership, it comes from the top, and people saying this is not okay, this is not how we're going to behave, and they have processes and procedures in place in order to deal with it. So in the university setting, we're doing a couple of things, trying to both equip the women, unfortunately, to be able to deal with those kinds of things when they get out, but we're also trying to change the culture and help our male students as well understand how to stop that biased behavior when they see it, and to be those male allies and those advocates when they get out in the workplace, so that hopefully this next generation can get that culture and climate changed.
I love that we're talking about differential equations, because I think in my own education, if I hadn't been at the best high school program in Austin or in Texas, I would have never even been exposed to what differential equations are if I weren't in a STEM field. So how does someone sitting out there who didn't have that opportunity hear the multiple joking references to DiffyQ on this panel as a matter of language? But I think that's a great point. We will need to break down these more and more complex problems and communicate them with passion and simplicity to build that STEM literate nation.
Thank you so much for coming.